Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 26th of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather information. No matter what part of Alaska you're in, you can get weather information from the National Weather Service at weather.gov/Alaska, or give us a call on the Weather Info line at 800-472-0391. In between the Alaska weather shows, check out National Weather Service Facebook pages, not only for NWS Alaska, but for anywhere in the lower 48 states. If you're traveling there or watching family travel there over the holiday, you can monitor really interesting weather situations. If you just have a big curiosity about the atmosphere, you could certainly check in and see what's going on around Dallas and Fort Worth and Oklahoma and into southern Missouri, all the way out across the Ohio Valley, where heavy rain and tornadoes will be occurring for the remainder of the weekend. If you'd like to check out Twitter, you can communicate with us that way as well. We have 4 National Weather Service Twitter accounts and even a Tsunami Warning Center account that if you follow that one, you can get automatic updates anytime there's an earthquake that might impact the Pacific Basin there or the coastline of Alaska. It's a great way to stay tuned to that. You can communicate with us and share weather pictures or just ask us questions by using the hashtag AKwx, and of course the address helps there too. And on YouTube, you can get your daily afternoon map briefing. Look for the daily broadcast there on the about 4 o'clock or so from NWS Anchorage. And then after this show into the evening hours, AKwx TV. If you search for that in your Google search bar or perhaps on YouTube, you'll be able to find this entire broadcast from our broadcast partner here at alaskapublic.org. Now, as you look at the wind gusts, as we go into tonight and tomorrow, we're going to be watching for some stronger winds to shape up around the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, mainly as we head into tonight and into certainly Monday. So Sunday night into Monday, stronger winds expected there. Notice we don't see stronger gusts showing up around Fairbanks or Bettles or Arctic Village. This is primarily over the higher terrain there. The higher elevations looking at some stronger southerly winds, and especially through the gaps and the passes there, generally west of Tok and Delta Junction included there. So we're going to probably talk about gusts that are on the order of 50 to 60 miles per hour, with the higher end of that being about 70 miles per hour. So with that, a high wind watch is posted. Again, that'll be for late in the evening Sunday and into Sunday night and early Monday, for high winds expected around the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, the Delta Junction area, and any region generally west of Tok. So watch for that as we go into the rest of the weekend, again starting late tomorrow. Here's a look at the big picture. In the satellite picture, you'll notice that big spin right over the Gulf of Alaska. This area of low pressure has been gradually filling in. It pushed a wave of weather up against southeastern Alaska throughout late last night and early this morning. Pretty fast wave too. Picked up, I think, about 6 inches of snow around the Juneau area. A little more than 9 inches around Hyder, so a little bit less than initially expected. So hopefully that turned out well in your neck of the woods there. And you didn't have to shovel too much there. But if you have snow reports, anytime you have stuff like that, that's a great way to use Twitter or Facebook and check in with the folks at NWS Juneau. So get on the twitter.com and say at NWS Juneau, hey, I'm in Ketchikan and I got 2 inches of snow, if that's what you had. And then make sure you tag Juneau and then hashtag, it's the # AKwx. And what do you know? They get your snowfall report, and it helps everybody do their job better, and also let your folks in Ketchikan know that, hey, we're on the map and we got snow. We want you to know about it. It's a great way to share that information. Really easy to do. And around Prince William Sound today, you can see the clouds filling in there from the east and southeast. Not a whole lot of active weather out across the open waters right now. Actually, really dry conditions there filling in. Now, you'll notice as you get across the Alaska Peninsula, we're starting to get more of that cloud cover building in from the east and southeast. There's another wave of low pressure right here, a little bit stronger, in fact. Up across the north, you can see not a whole lot going on. This is mainly cold air lingering across the northern coastal plain. A little bit of cloud cover here, moving across the north slope. There's a weak area of low pressure starting to develop there. Drier air out across the central Bering. And this is a bigger storm. This is gradually going to morph into something a little bit stronger as we go through the remainder of the weekend. So here we go. The frontal boundary is working right up against the coastal sections of southeast today and tonight. Low pressure just west of Bristol Bay and south and east of the Pribilof sitting at 971 millibars. And compared to what we've seen in recent weeks, that's not terribly strong. Several waves of low pressure are lined up across the continent, and they're all traveling from east to west, wrapping around that general circulation. And the low pressure sitting south and west of Kiska at 973 millibars. Got a little snow on the north and west side out there around Attu and Shemya. As we get into tonight, that's going to deepen a little bit more to about 968 millibars. Areas of rain and snow will surround that, and snow showers will continue back across the north and western segment of that. Showers of rain extend all the way from the central and eastern Aleutians into Bristol Bay, and on the northern side of that, perhaps as far north as Bethel, you could see just a little bit of snow showers with that. Nothing too spectacular. Snow showers will continue all the way into the Prince William Sound region. Rain just offshore for most of the coastal areas, and snow showers still remain possible for parts of southeast. But the trend of that heavier snow is rapidly diminishing, as you've probably already seen if you're sitting and watching in southeast tonight. Now, for most of the central and northern interior, it's going to be a mainly clear sky. You may see a few clouds from time to time, but clear means cold with still air, and boy, is it going to be chilly again as we head into the early morning hours of Sunday. The wind should be diminishing, though, for the north and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, so plan on improving conditions there. Wind chill advisory is no longer in effect, but last night we were talking about values that could be as cold as 55 below. Now that's a magic mark that we put in the sand that says, you know, it's going to be pretty bad, and if you're out for a short amount of time, you could have some pretty substantial damage to your body. But if it's minus 50, we don't have advisories. It's still going to be cold out there. It's just not going to hit that 55 below mark. So don't be fooled. The advisories are gone, the cold is not. Low pressure across the central Aleutians at 969 millibars, pulling in that west and southwesterly flow, and you can see the next wave moving toward the YK Delta, especially the K part of the YK Delta. That's moving into Bristol Bay. The triple point means better chance of rainfall moving through Kodiak Island and the northern parts of the Alaska Peninsula. Snow showers continue around Prince William Sound. You'll notice not a whole lot going on around Cook Inlet here, and then back across the Alaska Range again, the snow should pick up there. For southeast, high pressures trying to set up across southern parts of British Columbia. That could mean another opportunity for rain and snow in the capital city. Better chance for rain and snow up around Yakutat as well. And look, there's another low coming in from the west as we get from Sunday and into Monday. Those two areas kind of merge together into one bigger system, and the low drops to about 955 millibars. That's going to mean more wind, a stronger southwesterly flow coming into the western part of Alaska, and a new wave setting up across the eastern Gulf. That's at 1,003 millibars. This is dropping southward, but we get that steady south flow that's going to keep the focus of precipitation across central and especially northern sections of the Panhandle. So Haines and Skagway and Juneau and Gustavus and probably even Sitka, looking at least a chance for rain and snow, and maybe more snow than rain as you get into the nighttime hours. Now across the interior, we'll watch snow develop again from the Susitna Valley northward toward the Alaska Range, and then over that into the lower and middle Yukon Valley. Wind's going to pick up across areas north of the Bering Strait too. So for Kotzebue Sound and places like Point Hope and Point Lay, all the way out toward maybe Red Dog Mine, you're looking at a better chance for some snow and wind in that region. So keep an eye on the forecast as we start looking a little bit closer at going back to work on Monday. Here's a look at the forecast. So starting with temperatures today, we made it into the 30s for most of southeast. So temperatures even recovered a little bit more with snow and clouds in the region. It was 29 around Yakutat, 28 for Valdez, 34 in Cordova, just 1 degree cooler in Homer, with Kenai at 26, 28 in Talkeetna, 18 around Healy, 0 was the temperature we saw in Fairbanks today. It was 5 below in Eagle and 24 below around Fort Yukon, 26 below in Arctic Village, anywhere from 10 to 20 below across the North Slope, including at Kasuke at 18 below. 2 above for Kivalina, 3 above for Shishmaref, 17 on the day after Christmas in Nome, 15 in Unalakleet. Galena was 0, 15 in Bethel, and 18 for Ammonok. Bristol Bay temperatures held in the lower to mid 30s today. Kodiak saw 40. Areas along the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula were in the lower 40s. The northern coast saw temps in the 30s with the Pribilofs above freezing today, mid 30s for the central chain, and 31 out at Shemya. Now, overnight lows are going to be pretty cold across the northern interior from about 20 to 30 below, including Arctic Village at 30 below. Barrow about 14 below. Kotzebue near 2. Nome 12. Bethel looking at temps in the mid-teens. Bristol Bay might just make it above 0 or above freezing. On Alaska and Dutch Harbor, you're looking at about 35. St. Paul 33. Southeast lower 30s, pretty close to freezing there. Haines and Skagway probably going below it. 31 in Yakutat, 21 in Cordova, and 22 in Anchorage, with Talkeetna looking at 21 at Fairbanks. 9 below. A high tomorrow there above 0, but probably not higher than 10. Looking at 20 below for Arctic Village, 6 below in Barrow, 22 above in Nome, and temps above freezing again for most of Bristol Bay, 40 in fact around King Salmon, but only 31 in Bethel. On Alaska and Dutch Harbor, about 40 degrees, pretty close to that for Kodiak, 35 in St. Paul, and temperatures in southeast from the upper 20s to as warm as 40 down around Craig and Klawak, about 40 degrees in Sitka as well. Look for IFR conditions tomorrow in the northern end of southeast, Haines and Skagway, and around the Chilkoot and White Pass. So you're probably looking at diminishing visibility as you get into the afternoon. Same goes for parts of Prince William Sound and the western passes there along the Alaska Range. Parts of the Kuskokwim Delta also expecting IFR. And then offshore of Kotzebue Sound and off of Wales, you're looking at increased problems with visibility, or decreasing visibility, and lowered ceilings would be a better way to say that. And then also across the Pribilofs and southward toward the central chain and the eastern coast of Kodiak Island. Here's a look at the passes now. Inuktitut Pass expected to be VFR through most of the day. Same goes for Adigan Pass, looking for a VFR there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass look to be IFR. Rainy Pass expecting to move over toward IFR conditions throughout the day. Meanwhile, Windy Pass looks pretty good. Isabel Pass should be okay at VFR. Mentasta Pass right now looks pretty clear. Tanita Pass, we're looking for VFR conditions throughout your Sunday. Portage Pass, not so much. IFR conditions expected there throughout your Sunday. And Chilkoot and White Pass still looking to hold at IFR through most of the day. Freezing levels show that the warm air aloft in the eastern part of the Gulf is retreating now, but we have another surge of warmer air lifting northward, and you'll notice the rain that follows that trend. Surface freezing lines also moving northward a little bit out in the Bering. As you look at icing potential, generally above 4,000 feet is where we're finding warm moisture. And that is about light to occasional moderate across the western end of the YK Delta, across south central and Prince William Sound, and then south of Kodiak Island. No major threats right now, it looks like, for most of southeast. And then out west, we'll watch that trend pick up as we go into Sunday and Monday. The jet stream now shows a ridge building across the Gulf of Alaska, but what's out west? Well, another wave of stronger low pressure that's going to dive in and then set this ridge in place, it looks like, for a really good chunk of the week. So don't expect a whole lot of changes after that. The trough moving into the Pacific Northwest is also going to hold, so it's not just our pattern that's stagnant and kind of locked in place, but really setting up a pattern that's going to be locked in place for most of the lower 48 as well. At 9,000 feet, you see our broad southerly flow underneath that jet stream. Winds anywhere from 35 to 60 knots out across the Gulf from the south and southwest. A west and southwesterly flow north of the Brooks Range. And there's our low pressure systems out across the Bering. Look for those to stay in place. 3,000 feet, you can see a south and westerly flow moving across the chain. Southerlies over Bristol Bay at 40 knots. Stronger winds over Kodiak Island, 50 to 60. And southerlies become pretty light once you get east toward Prince William Sound. And slowing winds across southeast. Southerlies there about 15 to 20 knots, and light winds across the interior as well, 20 to about 30 knots there. Turbulence, we'll watch for areas around southwestern Alaska and across the central chain below about 4,000 feet. Could reach occasional moderate in some cases there. There's a lot of wind moving around across south central Alaska and the gaps and passes. And again, remember, we said we're going to watch for some gusts to develop across the eastern Alaska Range and Deltana and Tanana Flats region. Those gusts there at the surface could reach upwards of 70 miles per hour late Sunday night, but the process will start during the day. watch for at least some occasional moderate there. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with the rest of your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
10 to 10 cars, COL, possible OUIL. Westbound Hall, approaching Grossbeck. Light brown Pontiac, plate of Sam 497, all over the roadway. Comes back to an 87 Pontiac out of Clinton Township.
K9 1 testing 10, 161. 310. Where was that vehicle coming from? We're 21 and north right now.
Westbound Hall, approaching Grossbeck.
Is there a problem, officer?
Sir, do you know how fast you were going back there?
Oh, not exactly, around 60, 70 knots.
Okay, well, I clocked you at 70 knots in a 60-knot zone. That's more than 1.5 times stalling speed.
Gee, I didn't realize I was going that fast.
Do you know how much of the runway you used?
Oh, half, maybe 2/3.
Also, it looked like you were weaving coming down the center line on your final approach.
Well, I guess it was a little bit more crosswind than what I thought.
Do you know what the crosswind velocity of this airplane is?
About 12 knots.
About 12 knots. All right. Well, sir, it says here that you've been cited for excessive speed on rotation, improper trim on takeoff, and failure to comply with noise abatement procedures.
Oh, they dropped the noise abatement charges.
All right. Well, sir, what I'd like you to do is go ahead, tilt your head back, touch your fingertips to your nose, and tell me what VASI stands for.
Visual Airborne Systems Information.
Well, that's a nice try. That's 1 out of 4. You know what this means.
You're going to give me a ticket?
Yes, I am. It's going to be to a takeoff and landing clinic. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Imagine if there really were runway police. Hi, I'm Harry Chase, and I can sure remember a landing or two that could have gotten me pulled over. And what about takeoffs? We often overlook them when talk turns to the challenges of aviation. After all, it's hard to collide with the sky, right? We assume as long as we're leaving the ground instead of returning to it that there's nothing to worry about. But accident data and incident reports say otherwise. 1 out of every 5 aviation accidents occurred during takeoff. The fact is, both takeoffs and landings continue to humble expert pilots and novices alike, and provide material for hours of hangar talk about technique and theory. And during a recent 10-year period, virtually half of all aviation accidents occurred during these 2 brief phases of flight. The better prepared you are, the less chance you'll appear in an accident statistic column. And that's why the Air Safety Foundation created this presentation on takeoffs and landings, the ups and downs of general aviation. Now, takeoffs and landings are part art and part science. The science comes from the physical laws that govern flight, the physics of lift, drag, and thrust, and meteorological phenomena, winds and updrafts and downdrafts that affect an aircraft. The art comes in the ability to use the experience, knowledge, and feel to adjust for the shifting conditions that make every landing and every takeoff unique. What about you? How prepared are you for aviation's ups and downs? When's the last time you really practiced takeoffs and landings? And when's the last time you practiced in less than ideal wind conditions? What performance parameters do you monitor when you practice them? What is the strongest crosswind you're comfortable landing in? And is it really that cross? Sometimes, after you do the calculation, a 15-knot wind turns out to have only a 6-knot crosswind component. How much do you really know about the takeoff and landing performance of the plane you fly? You have to judge your own answers to the questions. There is no runway traffic cop. It's up to each of us to maintain our proficiency and operate safely. Let's face it, some runways and weather conditions are harder to deal with than others. If your home field has a 5,000-foot runway and the wind never blows, you've reduced the odds of getting into trouble at either end of the flight. But we all use more than one airport, and they all have challenging winds from time to time. No airplane is immune to problems that could create an emergency on takeoff or landing. But surprisingly, the majority of takeoffs and landing accidents aren't caused by wind, weather, density, altitude, or runway length. They're usually due to lack of basic pilot skill, loss of control during these common but critical phases of flight. So, as pilots, we can't take any takeoff or landing for granted. At the same time, we have to be ready to manage the extra challenges encountered at many airports when getting on or off the ground. Obstructions, short fields, soft fields, wind gusts, crosswinds, hot days that effectively shrink the runway length we have to work with. Night operations that rob us of visual clues, or having the sun directly in our eyes at sunrise or sunset. We have techniques and procedures for dealing with all of these situations. Is it our training or lack of exposure that accounts for the fact that only a small percentage of takeoff and landing accidents result from these adverse conditions? So, what about a normal takeoff and landing? You know, another windless day at the airport with the 5,000 feet of pavement. What do we need to consider in a situation like that? Okay, you're ready to take the active runway. There's no wind, no obstructions. You've got lots of pavement to work with, standard temperature and humidity, so what's there to think about? Let's start with the runway. Length is only one of the issues. If there's no wind and the field is non-towered, how do you select which direction to take off in? Would you base it on the direction you were flying, or think about what's lying off the departure ends, in case you have to put it on the ground after takeoff? Is there a slope to the runway? That will affect takeoff performance. Some runways are so sloped that pilots always take off downhill regardless of wind conditions. At other airports, you may have to decide if downhill with the wind is safer than uphill into the wind. Are there any rough spots in the runway you can avoid by favoring one side or the other? What about the runway condition? How's the braking action? Has it rained recently? Making it slick? If you have to stop your takeoff roll, that will become a factor. Runway surface condition is a factor cited in an impressive number of takeoff and landing accidents. What about the performance of the plane you're flying? What's the ideal rotation speed? And how do you know when you've reached it? So, as we can see, even a normal takeoff has several factors to take into account. And if you don't have these basics down for a normal takeoff or landing, you won't have the foundation to handle more complex and challenging situations.
He looks pretty warm there and sunny. In the meantime, on the other end of the world, it is changing around Bristol Bay. The ice has moved northward a little bit across areas just outside of Dillingham and Naknek. You can see reduced concentrations now south of Cape Newenham and really all the way up the coast toward Macoriac and Etoll Strait. Now the ice will continue to grow southward though as we have an east and more of a northeasterly flow. That's still remaining strong. If that slows down just a bit, which it doesn't look like it's going to do anytime soon, the ice would probably have a better chance of expanding a little bit faster. Not the case right now. Check the ice edge anytime you want at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. In southeast, look for south and easterly winds to remain somewhat light tomorrow across the Dixon entrance and on the outside, 15 knots. They're picking up a little bit more as you head toward Yakutat with a 14-foot sea. Northerlies are coming down Lynn Canal and through Frederick Sound and Stevens Passage, also around 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. But we're going to expect those winds to pick up again as we head into Monday. And outside of Cross Sound, winds come up to 40 to 45 knots with 19-foot seas outside of Yakutat, 30 to 35 knots south of Sitka, and the Inner Channel is also seeing winds come up to 20 to 25 and 4 to 5-foot seas there on Monday with stronger gusts. For Cook Inlet and most of south central northeasterlies will be the rule there, especially around Kenai. Southeasterlies coming into the Barren Islands at 35 knots, 12-foot seas on the outside. 30 knots inside of Prince William Sound, 40 knots outside of Montague Island with 14-foot seas expected there. Southerlies east of Kodiak Island shift to more of a southwesterly direction on Monday with a 16-foot sea there. You'll also see southwesterlies picking up inside of Shelikof Strait. Northerlies continue inside of Cook Inlet, and south and southeasterlies come into areas outside of Resurrection Bay and Prince William Sound to about 45 knots there, looking at 20-foot seas on the outside, 9-foot seas on a 40-knot wind on the inside of Prince William Sound. The Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay looking at southeasterly winds there for Sunday. Southerlies a little bit further down the coast. South and southwesterly winds for the Pacific coast at 30 knots with 13 to 16-foot seas. Those are picking up as well as we head into Monday. Expect higher gusts in the region. 19 to 23-foot seas there on the Pacific side with 9 to 13-foot seas on the Bering Sea coast for Monday afternoon. For the Aleutians, a south and westerly wind will bring storms through areas across Adak and Atkins southward toward Nikolsky and eastward toward Unalaska, the winds diminish a little bit more there. So you're looking at 30 knots on the Bering Sea coast to about 40 knots, and then on the Pacific coast, 45 to 55 knots. Seas there ranging from 22 feet in the east to about 33 feet between Nikolsky and Atka, and 30 to 50 knots out across the west. So quite a variation in wind speeds and directions for Sunday. Again, know before you go. For Monday, winds diminish in all areas, especially for the central and eastern chain, but we're going to see the wind shift a little bit as well. A stronger southerly flow from Nikolsky to Unalaska, 17-foot seas in the north, 24-foot seas in the south, and more of a west and southwesterly flow developing from Kiska to Adak and Atka, 25 to 35 knots there with the northwesterly wind for Attu and Shemya, 30 knots with a 16-foot sea. As you look on the west coast, north and easterly winds continue from St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island, and kind of about 30 to 35 knots in most areas. A little bit stronger out around St. Matthew at 40 knots with a northeasterly flow, and easterlies are expected around St. Paul and St. George with a 7-foot sea. For Monday, the winds are going to shift a little bit more, coming up from the south and east, 40 knots in the Kuskokwim Bay region with an 11-foot sea. And look at the winds around St. Lawrence Island. Northeasterlies over the ice at 40 knots, and 14-foot seas will be generated around the St. Matthew Island waters there with that 40-knot wind as well. For the North Slope, look for southeasterlies around the Beaufort Sea coast at 25 knots. Northerlies coming into the Bering Strait at 15 to 25. That'll pick up to 25 knots for most areas south of Cape Lisburne on Monday. Winds will diminish a little bit more from Barrow to Point Lay, light at 15 knots, and a gentle westerly breeze coming across Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik. Almost sounds nice, doesn't it? Here's a look at the forecast for the rest of tonight. Look for a generally clear sky across the central and eastern interior, but out across the west, stormy conditions there. Storm force winds, in fact, south of the chain at 968 millibars. Low pressure is pushing a front to the east, and that will move into south and western Alaska in the next day or so. Rain and snow showers continue across the coastal areas of the Gulf. With low pressure in the southern Bering at 969 millibars, we'll see more of a southerly flow for most of south central and southeast. Look for the storm to merge across the southern Bering on Monday at 955 millibars, and snow showers will start to develop across the interior with a high wind watch for the eastern Alaska range. That's your Alaska weather, and thank you.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
If you are a rural Alaskan resident with an interest in preserving subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing for future generations, and maintaining an open forum for public expressions, opinions, and concerns regarding subsistence, consider applying for one of the Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Councils by Friday, January 29, 2016. More info at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.